So we're going to have 3 amazing marketing and growth hacking talks. And this is moderated by Andrus Purde. He's the marketing guy, the head of marketing at Pipedrive. And since Pipedrive is hosting the party, he's also basically paying for our drinks. Have a big applause to him.
Hello, good morning. Good morning. I wanted to check your observance levels first. Do you know, have you figured out why this stage is called the yellow stage? Anybody? Because there's an orange placard in the background. There was a patch of yellow earlier that side as well. But good morning. This morning we'll be hearing 3 excellent growth and marketing talks. And then there's a thing in the end, like there's a pause in between each of these 3 talks. And I have to give you a tip from the Estonian riot police. When Estonian riot police, when they see an angry mob of people armed with sticks and guns, they go up to these rioters and say, "Do you have any questions?" And everybody just is very quiet. But this stage is not the Estonian riot police, so if I ask, "Do you have any questions?" feel free to ask, pitch in. I know it's early in the morning, but let's make this as interactive as it can be. All right, are you ready to get started? 2 people there, 1 there, let's get started. All right, I'd like to introduce you to your first speaker of the morning. This is Sean Percival, who's an American investor based in Norway and also a speaker. He's invested in more than 120 companies, advised more than 100, he has written a book called The Loud American's Guide to Doing Business in Norway. So please put your hands together for Sean Percival.
Hello, everyone. Most people suck at marketing. Yes. And jokes, no joke. But it's very rare in my business that I actually meet founders and he or she is a great marketer, great at fundraising, great at the business economics and so forth. My goal today is to make you suck less at marketing. Now that's really tough to do in the short time that we have, which is slowly ticking away here. So if you have any other questions, please ask. I know we're in a shy country. Please take a shot, whatever it takes, ask a question afterwards. This talk is also mostly geared for very early stage companies. So if you're a mature late stage company, you're probably going to be a little bit bored and think you know all this stuff. Really quick, I'm American, so I'm going to talk about myself for about 20 minutes. If we have time, we'll then get to some of the actual content. As they mentioned, previously I was a former partner with 500 startups. That's the most active investor in the world. They've done about 1,800 investments now, 120 of those were mine. I also ran their accelerator programs both in Mountain View, Silicon Valley, also in Oslo and Stockholm and a few other markets. So I'm very passionate about helping early stage founders get from 0 to 1, which in many times is the most difficult. Today I'm working with an accelerator called the Katapult Accelerator. This is taking place in Oslo. We're actually focused on impact, companies that have a positive impact on society or the environment. If that is you in the audience, please make sure to come talk to me. I'm also on Twitter. Feel free to heckle me or follow me on there. Previously, I was also vice president at MySpace. This crowd looks roughly old enough to remember MySpace. For the young millennials, this is how you got laid before Tinder, just so you know. And like most VCs, I started my illustrious career as a janitor. That's not true. Actually, it's true I'm a janitor. Most VCs go to nice schools and so forth. That wasn't me. Let's start really quick with some pro tips. Number 1, and this is where I see startups struggle the most, you probably need to try at least 10 things to get just one thing that works with regard to marketing. Many times I see startups, they put all their energy, all their time into this one campaign, this one launch, that fails, and then they're kind of screwed. So get into the habit of trying many things, learning, failing, adapting. When something works, you simply double down on it. This is especially true for websites, e-commerce, a little bit different with mobile apps, but I just want you to think about that up to 98% of the people that engage with your website are not going to do what you want them to do. That's probably make a purchase, sign up, do something. So you have to be very focused on how you bring these people back, literally drag them back to the website. Another part where startups fail, Someone comes to the site, they didn't convert, well, shit, I don't know what to do. Let's get more traffic. Let's try something different. It's very, very hard to get someone to engage with your product. So when they do, you want to do everything you can to drive them to the point of a sale, conversion, sign up, whatever that might be. Marketing also, it's very important to understand, it's about moving emotions. In America, we have our Super Bowl commercials. These are the big sort of advertising venue. The best commercials typically move 2 or more emotions in that 30-second spot. That's what gets people excited. Here are some of my favorite emotions, obviously. Desire, greed, as I mentioned, I'm American. But greed doesn't necessarily mean your greed. It could mean the greed of your customers. Use our product, you will make more money, you will save more time, your business will run better. Think about how you play into these. FOMA is a favorite of Silicon Valley. If you don't know, that's fear of missing out. You need this app, you need this service, your competitors are using this. If you don't have this, you're at a disadvantage. Knowing your stuff with regard to marketing is the key to fundraising as well. You have to know your metrics. You have to present to investors that you understand what it takes to scale a business. They are going to give you money, and you're going to turn €1 into €2, and you know how to repeat this at scale. Finally, this is the thing I hate hearing the most as an investor. We did this with no marketing. I see a lot of founders that get really excited about that. You know, they practically tattoo it across their chest. This is actually the worst thing you could say. It means we're not really sure why this is working, and we don't know how to repeat, and we don't know how to scale. Related to that, we're just going to go viral. We're launching a viral campaign. I've seen very, very few startups actually be built on virality or a viral campaign. The only one I have is the Dollar Shave Club, who I worked with in Los Angeles. And yeah, they did take off. If you saw that video, it was funny. They had 13,000 orders in the first 10 minutes that video came out. That's very, very rare. They did another video, guess what? Not as much. It's very hard to sort of capture virality. It's especially hard to repeat it. A few ways that you're not going to grow your business before we get started. Number one, trying to meet with too many investors before you launch. I get a lot of really bad pitches where they're sort of in the idea stage, or they sort of have the beautiful logo and they've done a few things, but they don't have anything to talk about. So if you're spending your time and energy talking to an investor before you have metrics, you're not likely to get investment. In this world, there really only is 2 different kinds of pitches. There's a traction pitch and a vision pitch. Think about which one gets funded. The vision pitch obviously is a lot more difficult. Staying in beta way too long. So as they mentioned, I do work a lot in Norway, and in Scandinavian countries especially, I hear a lot of companies, yep, we've been in beta for 2 years, we're in beta, we're figuring it out. And I always joke, well, that's cool, my check is in beta too, until you guys actually release the damn thing. So really think about this. This word, I also want to tell you, is not really used in Silicon Valley anymore. If you say we're in beta, you're basically signaling, yeah, we're still figuring it out, we're probably too early for you. VCs will talk to you. That is our job, is to be nice to you, because we never know what you'll do in the future. But you're not likely to get money if you're still in beta. Having lots of coffee meetings with all your fellow disruptors and thought leaders as well, too. A lot of founders spend time on this, has no impact on the business, gives you some heart palpitations from drinking too much coffee. Designing that kick-ass logo and making all the shirts and the stickers and all this junk, all the swag. Especially see this in Nordics as well. It's like, how much money and time do they spend on that damn logo? They haven't even launched the site. Logo's beautiful. I have seen very few businesses being built upon a logo. And if you look at every major business, Yahoo, Twitter, all these big companies, their logos look awful at first. That's not where you want to put your time and energy. And the final, maybe the most important thing, going to too many conferences and listening to people on stage act like they have all the answers. Probably not going to help you. You should be at home right now growing your business. We're too late about that, though. How do you talk to investors about marketing? This is also important, too. So number one, really, really know your numbers. This is how we test you. Do you understand the business? Are you ready to scale? So you have to be very precise. You never use ranges, especially on really important numbers like acquisition cost. If you tell me your acquisition cost is 10 to 20 euros, that's a big difference. Investors push you on your metrics and your marketing numbers, because in our minds we're trying to extrapolate, is this a real business? Will they be able to scale? We're trying to understand the economics of it too. We're also seeing, do you live and die by these numbers? As you should. Every morning you should wake up and look at a dashboard, look at analytics. Is it working? Is it growing? This is what we really want to know. If you don't have the data when you're talking with investors, get it. And what you do is you very politely say, you know what, I have all that information at home. I'm happy to email it to you tonight. Then you walk out of the meeting, you frantically call your CTO, and you say, holy shit, I don't know any of these numbers. Can we find them? And then you mail them to the investor. So this is basically a test. We're trying to sort of see. We'll ask you very, very weird questions that you don't know off the top of your head. We want to make sure you're quantifying the business and you can find that information. Most importantly, with marketing, with talking to investors, you want to talk about your cohorts and how they're improving over time. So we've noticed that we're doing extremely well with females aged 20 to 30. We're putting all our money into there. That audience is growing 40% month over month. So a cohort, if you don't know, it's a way to segment your audience. Typically, we look at things on a month over month basis, but you can slice it in different ways. And this is also related to is selling of your momentum. Investors don't want to invest in a flat business. So if you have no numbers, if you've been flat for a year, there's not enough excitement there. We want to invest in a business right as it's been propped up. We put the money in, and you scale it from there. So always be thinking, how do you sell the momentum? This thing is working. Our acquisition cost is lower. Our growth is higher. More traffic, more money. This is also the ideal slide I like to see if I'm talking about marketing or how a company grows their business. So it's actually an example from my last startup as well. And sort of to my very first point here, notice we're not getting our sales, this is an e-commerce site just for reference, we're not getting our sales from a single channel. We have multiple channels that are performing. So if one channel goes down, we're not completely screwed. We can then start to put money into other channels. It's also not bad to go to investors and talk about channels that are not working. Because basically you're saying that, listen, you give me money, I'm not putting money into these bad performing channels. Your money is going to be spent efficiently in these top performing channels. Now into the actual marketing goodness. So I think some of you have seen this. This is from my former boss, Dave McClure. This is startup metrics for pirates, because it goes R. And this is really what you need to think about on your business too. So I'd encourage you to go home and think about, am I hitting every single one of these? These basically are a concert. And when the concert is in tune, that's when the business grows. You're acquiring users. You're activating them. Strong onboarding. You're not afraid to send them emails. You're not afraid to get in touch with them to sort of guide them on the path. You're ensuring that you retain them. You start to notice when people are leaving, when they're not spending as much money. Then you sort of push them. You give them new products. You nudge them as it takes. Now that you've locked them in, you can begin to get referrals. They can generate additional traffic, and you're generating revenue. So very, very important. This is the startup metrics for pirates, pyramid of love. I want to just talk about a few channels really quick here. As I mentioned, it's hard to go deep into marketing in such a short talk. So just a few things to think about. If you have advanced questions afterwards, please ask. Do not be shy. So doing lead gen, doing tests. So I see a lot of companies where it's like, yeah, you know, the developers said that they're going to ship the product to me and blah, blah, blah. So whenever a developer says they're going to ship something, you always add about 3 to 4 times longer, because that's what it's going to take. I rarely see that people actually ship stuff on time. So you, as marketers, you actually need to reduce the dependency on your developers to build leads, to validate, to do testing. The easiest way to do this is with Unbounce. It's a landing page platform. Anyone, regardless of your technical skills, can create a beautiful page. You can begin to start gathering some data. Even if your product is not ready, you're generating leads, so when you do launch, you can actually start emailing people, getting them to engage in the products. You're testing the messaging, you're figuring out what call to actions work. You can start to test pricing if you're not sure. You're just doing a lot of tests in preparation for the actual launch. Using paid traffic also is the best way to get the results you need. When you do these kind of tests, you have to get usually 1,000 or thousands of visitors on the page before you get a true winner. So don't be afraid to use paid marketing. I see a lot of companies that are apprehensive to do this. We're not ready, the logo's not perfect. There's always a million excuses. Paid marketing, landing pages, you can test things away from your main page so it's less risk. I think you probably already know this, but landing pages work best if you offer a carrot. And a carrot is basically meaning you dangle something out on a string. You know, we're going to give you a white paper, consultation, we're going to wash your car, we're going to do something for you. You're going to win something, that I want your email address in exchange. Retargeting, also incredibly powerful and extremely underutilized by startups. I meet with a lot of startups who are like, yeah, I don't know what that means. And if you've ever done shopping, you've been the victim of retargeting, where it's basically like following you along the web. You're like, I just looked at those shoes, and now it's on here and there. it's a very, very effective way. This kind of goes to that point about bringing people back to the site. If you've never done it, I recommend starting with AdRoll. This is a very simple platform. It's retargeting with training wheels. Anybody can do it. As you get more advanced, Facebook has many different options for retargeting, building of custom audiences, building of lookalike audiences. There's a lot that you can do with it. I recommend that you add that pixel to your site today, start tracking these people. Retargeting is not retroactive, so you cannot go track people that visited you months ago. So I would start building up this audience and then begin to show them ads throughout the web. Also good for branding. Most of you, if you're an early stage company, you're what I call a baby startup. No one really knows you exist, and they look at your website and then they get distracted. They get that Tinder notification or Facebook, whatever it might be, and they've lost track of what they were doing. This is where retargeting will bring them back. It'll also continuously show your logo as they browse the site, build some awareness, and it especially even works if you have a long sales cycle. If your sales cycle is 6 to 9 months, you need to do everything you can to stay on top of mind with these folks. Social media, mostly a vanity metric. I rarely see social media driving a lot of meaningful revenue for a business. And by this I mean having a Facebook page, having a Twitter, having an Instagram. It's good to have because it establishes that you're legitimate, that you're real. Things like Instagram, hard to have a link, so you can't actually drive any value from it. Twitter, people are not looking to buy stuff on Twitter. They're looking to look at news. It's not a very transactional platform. Facebook, on the other hand, a little bit more functional, but I see way too many startups spending way too much time and energy having a beautiful Facebook page and not being focused on driving traffic and making sales. On SEO, so I actually started my career in marketing doing SEO. To me, it was fun, manipulating Google for fun and profit, essentially. Now, SEO is no longer as viable as a channel as it used to be. And why is this? Mostly because Google has done everything they can to kill the SEO business. Why would they want people getting free traffic when they make the majority of their money on paid ads? So over the last few years, Google has been giving us less and less data. It makes it harder to do our job. At the same time, social and other channels tend to be better performers, faster, quicker, easier to get traffic out of. So I typically advise startups on SEO, you don't need to go too deep on it. You need to cover the basics, making sure your site is indexed properly, that you're starting to have all the sort of right on page and building links and doing some of the basic work. It's also an investment you need to make early on, and it takes months before you see the benefit of it from that. But for you that are in sort of very specific niches, there's actually no reason why you shouldn't completely own that niche. So niche, very small audience, very focused. That's what I would put my time into. So if you're the sort of best company of renovating factories, whatever it might be, like these are things that are actually very easy to own with regard to SEO. That's where I'd put my time in. I would put the energy in the front of the business. As you start, you'll begin to see organic traffic grow over time. Final pitfalls to avoid. So acquiring of bad customers. And typically startups, they're so desperate to get users, customers, they'll take anyone. This actually is long-term going to hurt your business. If you do too much discounting, for example, you're giving people half off, you're doing all this stuff, you're basically attracting the worst people that exist on this planet because they are price sensitive, they love to complain, they typically churn, they leave you at a very high rate. So you want to be focused on acquiring the right customers. High overhead, low yield partnerships. Typically what this means, it's usually like, trying to sort of work on something where it's like, yeah, this one company has 100,000 people on the email list, we're putting 3 months into the campaign, we're going to get just tons of cash out of it. But think about a 100,000 person email list, maybe 14% open the email. Okay, now we're down to 14,000. And maybe only 4%, 3% actually click through. So even a large email list, that you put a lot of time and effort in doing a partnership around, doesn't typically yield a lot. This also applies to other startups. I see a lot of startups partnering up. It's a little bit of the blind leading the blind. Neither of you have a lot of users. Neither of you really know what you're doing just yet. And once again, you're going to spend a lot of time and energy. You're not going to get much out of it. Spending too much money on PR. So this is, as a startup in the early days, you have to do all the PR yourself. You have to own marketing. You have to be the expert here. A lot of companies want to just hire a PR agency. A good PR agency is 4,000 to 5,000 euros a month. They take 2 to 3 months to show decent results. They typically are more focused on acquiring new clients. Is there any PR people here that I'm just totally offending? I apologize. But really, like, that money could be spent much better on online marketing, where you have more control over it. You can adjust the levers. PR is great. PR people are wonderful when you sort of raise enough capital and you have the money to sort of sustain them. In the early stage, though, you should be going out. You should be getting the press. It's actually pretty easy to get tech press. The one sort of hack I'll tell you is when you go to a tech publication, you don't target the editor. You target the most recent hire that they brought on board. So this new journalist, he or she has no connections. They're struggling to find stories. They're more eager to work with new companies. The editor is going to look at your email and probably deleted it. If you engage this new journalist, what happens, media moves very fast. He or she is going to move up the ranks, going to change publications, and you can stay with them. And they'll keep writing about you on an ongoing basis. And the final, sorry, I kind of rushed through this, but we're short on time. The biggest mistake you can make is waiting to start marketing. As I mentioned, you may have a million excuses. We're waiting for this app. We don't know about this. The logo is being finished. This is the biggest mistake you can make. You should be out there today, figuring out your audience, gathering email addresses, spending less time at conferences. Thank you, everyone. Sorry, I rushed through that, but I want to, that clock, it's like intimidating.
Yeah, it's working against us. So I'd like to ask the first question myself, because it's such a breath of fresh air to see an investor who actually knows a thing, like who knows a thing about marketing. Because usually I think investors tend to see marketing as one cell in a spreadsheet, which is not a very good place to be. So my question is, Katapult investments, are you looking to invest in Estonian and Baltic startups too?
We are, absolutely. It's a global program. It takes place in Oslo. It's a very short plane ride from here. But yeah, we're from all over the world. And I would say that if the program was 100% Norwegian, that would be a failure on our part. We would love to see half companies come internationally. A lot of focus on Baltics and Africa.
Yeah, and again, it's just, I would recommend it knowing how little attention some investors pay to marketing.
Yep.
Excellent. Any questions from the audience? Raise your hand if you do. There's a question in the back. Please wait for the box to be thrown at you.
All right, we have one brave soul.
Okay.
Let's have it.
I'm a bit confused here. I've got 2 points. One thing you're talking about SEO, which actually means you want to fool Google or manipulate Google. How does that counter your ethical marketing? The second element, you talked about paid advertisements. Facebook ads, Google ads, and all that. I'm pretty sure a lot of audience sitting here, we pay to Netflix or Spotify, so we don't have those paid ads. I mean, I'm willing to pay not to see your ad, so why should I actually go for those ads?
So I think you asked about ethics in marketing. Maybe I'll sound too American. Why would you worry too much about ethics? I'd be mostly worried about growing the business. You're not ripping people off. You're offering a real service, too. But in business and startups, the whole thing is about having an unfair advantage. So if you have a growth hack, if you manipulate Google, that's an unfair advantage, and you're going to win. So that's a good thing. Netflix is the best business in the world. They have a churn rate of less than 1%. They do plenty of marketing, plenty of paid ads. That's probably how you got familiar with them, from an ad, from hearing about it, too. So I know what you're saying, where it's like you sort of cringe about paid marketing, but this is the best and fastest way to get it. And if your marketing is targeted correctly, then it's a value to the user. Because they'll see this and be like, oh, that's right, I actually did want a way to manage my sales pipeline. Great. So it's like, if you're just blasting out and doing it efficiently, yes, not very good. But if you're targeting very precisely, if you're doing retargeting, that means somebody hits your site, they already showed interest, and you're just trying to bring them back with an ad. I hope that answers the question.
One more quick question, just in the front here.
Hey, Sean. Can you talk a little bit about voice in marketing and developing a personality, and not only your social, well, especially in social media marketing, but also in creating your ads that you would put onto remarketing or Facebook or Google?
Yeah, it's a great question. So my favorite voice of a startup is MailChimp. I'm sure you all use MailChimp. They actually have a guide. So I think if you type brand tone or brand message, MailChimp, they have the entire guide of how they talk about themselves, how they talk to users. So you want it to be fun, you want it to be irreverent, you want it to also be very sort of quick and succinct. I think this is the big challenge with messaging, especially in an ad. So imagine you're going through a news feed, there's lots of activity happening. If the messaging is too long, it's too much to process. It has to be something very quick that gets my attention. Questions work very well. Sense of urgency is one of your best sort of mechanisms for marketing. 7 days left to get this pricing. Use the same service that 400 other companies do. Using these type of urgency, legitimacy, metrics in the messaging, that also helps. But I would definitely look at the MailChimp, if you're looking about tone and how to talk to users, they have the best guide. Otherwise, this is why you test. Because you'll have these meetings, and these meetings are so frustrating, where it's like you have 5 people, and we should say this, we should say that. Like the marketer should stand up and say, let's try everything and see what works. So data doesn't lie, hips don't lie, like Shakira says. But that's how you figure it out. Thank you for laughing at that awful joke, too. But yes, that's why you A/B test. Then you can figure out exactly which messaging works with the users. You can A/B test on landing pages. You can A/B test in ads as well, too. Run multiple ads.
Unfortunately, we have no time for other questions, but please catch him at the event, catch him at Twitter, Percival, or at Katapult. Thank you,
Cool.
Sean.
Thank you so much.
If you've just joined us, welcome. We are doing growth and marketing talks. There's a few seats here. Raise a hand if you have a free seat next to you. So if you want a seat, just find one of the hands and just sit next to them, or into the lap of the person who's raised their hands. We have a flow here. We looked at advice to startups, what to do. Now we're going to look at what can go wrong with startups. I'd like to introduce you to your next speaker, who is a serial entrepreneur. She not started, but sold her first company when she was 19. She's worked in more than 50 countries. I think most of us have traveled to less than 50 countries. And she's spent a lot of time in Silicon Valley really understanding the ins and outs of it, written a book about it, is now consulting and advising startups, investors, mentors, how to take the best use of Silicon Valley best practices. So without further ado, please put your hands together for your next speaker, Michelle Messina.
Good morning. I am American, but I'm only going to take 1 minute to talk about myself rather than 20 minutes. I have worked in about 50 different countries, and I've spent a lot of time looking at entrepreneurs and what they do well and what they don't do well. And so this is kind of the reverse of Sean's presentation in the sense that this is the what not to do. So I wrote this book, Decoding Silicon Valley, The Insider's Guide, and we didn't necessarily take the negative perspective in the book, but I've taken the negative perspective on the presentation today. So I spent a lot of time talking to startups, and I estimate I've heard about 5,000 pitches in the last couple years. And what I want to talk about briefly is some of the things that really kill startups. One of the things we love about entrepreneurs is that they have this really big vision. 10, 12 years ago, we used to talk about Elon Musk in Silicon Valley as kind of a crazy big visionary. Now he's a crazy big billionaire visionary. But we love that sort of big vision that entrepreneurs can create, because there's a lot of magic and promise and optimism and hope that comes from that big vision, and it makes us feel upbeat and optimistic about the future. The challenge is that we've got a lot of focus on unicorns, these private companies that are valued at over $1 billion, when in reality most startups are not unicorns and will never be unicorns, because there's so much hard work to try to figure out where the market opportunity is and how do we create a sustainable, repeatable business model. So the sad truth is that 90% of startups fail. And when I looked at all the failure data out there, and believe me, there's not a lot of data out there, why startups fail? It's really easy to figure out how many companies start, because you have legal, tax filings, business filings, incorporation filings. There's all that data associated with when a company starts. But when you get to the other side of it, when you get to the 90% that eventually fail, and you try to identify and zero in on the data about why companies fail, there's just not a lot of data out there. Some of the sources that I looked at were mostly entrepreneurs self-reporting the reasons that they failed. If I look at all the different reasons, it boiled down to suicide, not homicide. The biggest single problem that startups face is product market fit. Do you have a product? Does the market want it? Does it meet their needs? Are they willing to buy it, and are they willing to pay for it today? This is the single biggest issue associated with why startups fail. And there's about 1,000 different factors that I could sort of categorize under product market fit. But one of them is the market large enough? I've met a lot of founders around the world, and they say, you know, we thought this was a really big market, but when we actually got out there and talked to customers, it really wasn't a very serious problem. There weren't a lot of companies that had that particular problem, and so in reality, what we thought was a huge market turned out to be a really small market. So the size of the market opportunity, I would say, fits under the product market fit issue. Not listening to the market is another thing. I met 2 founders in Brazil about 3 years ago. They had an online tutoring application. They were both from the high school educational discipline in their job functions, and they thought that they would be able to provide a lot of counseling and tutoring to high school students to help them do better on their grades in preparation for the college process. The fact of the matter was their application was being sought out after by corporate employees who wanted to qualify to the next level of promotion in their company. So it was corporate employees who were looking to strengthen their skill set. So that they could, you know, achieve more advancement, increase their salaries, et cetera. These 2 founders kept focusing on the high school market over here when really, in reality, the corporate employees were the ones that were paying for the product. So, you know, if you're not listening to the market, that's a fundamental reason why companies fail. And I see this all the time, especially when we've got technical engineers that don't necessarily understand the process about speaking to their market, asking really engaging, open-ended questions, and then being able to interpret that feedback. There is a lot of bullshit in the startup space. There's a lot of exaggeration about what our products can do, what they will do, what they won't do. There is just a lot of exaggeration that takes place, and I see this all over the world. So one of the reasons that I've found, not necessarily CEOs self-reporting that the fact that our product didn't deliver on its promises, it was really more the market saying, you know, we're not going to buy this product because it doesn't do what it said it was going to do. A lot of companies run out of money. This is a big problem in the sense that they can't get enough traction in the marketplace, and they only have limited amount of, you know, savings. They can only get a second line of credit on their house. They're using their credit cards to pay their bills. They run out of money. They run out of time, right? There's only a limited amount of time where you can fund the process of validating your product or service in the marketplace. And so being thoughtful about, you know, how long it's going to take to get traction in the marketplace is really important. The other thing on time, I did a survey last week when I was in Beirut of about 35 companies. I said, when you guys started your companies, how many of you asked yourself, is this the right time to start a company? Not a single hand went up in the room out of 35 companies. So what I'm finding is not just it takes a long time, but is this the right time is one of the reasons that I think companies fail as well. So not many entrepreneurs that I found ask themselves that. It does take a long time. Biz Stone, the founder of Twitter, said timing, perseverance, and 10 years of trying will eventually make you look like an overnight success. Think about that for a minute. 10 years of trying will make you look like an overnight success. One of the other things I found is you guys all know what OSMs are, right? Oh shit moments. Okay, this is when the founder is going along their path, they're got all these things that they need to do, and all of a sudden they wake up and they go, oh shit, this is not gonna work. Just about every entrepreneur I've ever talked to, every entrepreneur I've ever worked with has had at least one, if not 5, oh shit moments. How many of you guys have had oh shit moments before? Yeah, this is one of the things that happens. And I think a lot of times you get to those oh shit moments more quickly if you have a good network of mentors, advisors, and coaches. Because your mentors can ask questions about the business that allow you to kind of think through more thoughtfully about, you know, this path that we're on, where is it leading us to? So that's one of my advices to you, is make sure you've got good mentors and coaches. When you do make mistakes, when you do fail, when there are errors, Not being able to rebound quickly enough is another reason I think companies fail. There's a whole issue associated with failure. There's the shame, the guilt, all that good stuff that comes with it. But how you respond and rebound from that is really important as a founder, how you motivate your team to kind of get to the next step in the process. And the managing of the emotions for founders is really, really important. If you can't manage your way through a failure and you can't tell yourself a story that, yes, in fact, that was a learning experience and now I need to move on, we're never going to make that mistake again. We may make others, but we're never going to make that mistake again. That's a really important part of the process. So the rebound time after a failure, whether it's a small failure or a big failure, is really important. Not having good mentors, coaches, or advisors. There's a lot of people out there who've been there, done that, who've been successful building their companies, who've made mistakes, who've been in those sectors, who have built those marketplaces, et cetera, et cetera. You've got to find mentors and coaches that can help you get to the next step in a more sustainable way, more predictable, less mistakes in your whole process. So this is a really important aspect that I found that entrepreneurs that are failing did not have a strong network of mentors and coaches. Less so is around founder conflict. Of course, I've seen founders that can't get along, or one wants to go pursue the consumer market, another wants to go pursue the B2B market. I've certainly seen that. I've certainly seen the dynamic where they're fighting for control of the business and who's going to be the CEO. I've also seen it where they don't have a clear decision-making process, in the sense that they don't have an agreement on how they make decisions and who has the final decision. So this again goes back to the whole factor of suicide, not necessarily homicide. Expertise is in the wrong place. Either it's in the wrong physical place, or it's in the wrong place from the necessary expertise that they need in the marketplace to build the business. So what you build, where you build it, and where your team is based is really important to the success of your business, especially if you're building a global company. Another reason is associated with the extreme discomfort of the uncertainty of running a company. Because let's face it, as an entrepreneur, it's really hard to predict where you're going to be in 6 months, let alone 6 weeks or 6 years. That's why nobody writes business plans that have 5-year financial projections on it. We all know it's bullshit. But the fact of the matter is, there's a lot of people that fundamentally have a problem with that sort of uncertainty out there in the future. So if you're not cut out for that uncertainty, and you can't live with the fact that you don't know where you're going to be 6 months or 9 months from now, then maybe it's not something that you should be doing as an entrepreneur. Anxiety, depression, panic. This is definitely a factor with entrepreneurs, because it's a lonely, hard job building a company, growing a company successfully. And so I find a lot of entrepreneurs don't necessarily talk about this openly, number one. And then number two, don't proactively manage the whole series of symptoms and feelings that come with this. You got to be really strong, really resilient. You've got to be the super optimist in your company. You've got to be the ultimate leader. You've got to be the super networker, the incredible salesperson. I mean, you wear like 20 hats as an entrepreneur. I mean, let's face it, it's exhausting. So if you're not able to manage your emotions effectively, then you can't do everything you're supposed to do. So managing the emotions is, I think, a factor around success. Moving too slowly, moving too quickly, but moving too slowly is mostly what I find is a big reason for companies failing. They can't necessarily interpret what's happening out there in the market quickly enough to figure out what that means with respect to the product, the go-to-market strategy, the aftermarket service and support, et cetera, et cetera. So speed and intensity is a real big factor in Silicon Valley, for example. If I meet somebody that's of interest to me, I'm going to send them an email within 24 hours. I'm not waiting a week later or 2 weeks later to get in touch with them, because those opportunities go away. I may no longer be in the front of their brain, and it's really important that I reach out to those opportunities right away. The decision to persevere or pivot is a really tough decision. I have had dozens of companies come up to me and say, so how do I decide whether or not I should pivot? You know, and it's all very specific around what's happening with the business with respect to the kind of feedback they're getting from the market or not, the amount of sales that they're making or not, you know, what kind of input they're getting from their customer advisory board. Oh, you don't have a customer advisory board? That's another thing that I think entrepreneurs need to be really focused on is how do I find 2 or 3 friendly customers that are going to give me the kind of feedback that I need about my product, my strategy, et cetera. So the decision to persevere or pivot is a really tough decision. And I have found that companies don't necessarily spend enough time doing the analyses to figure out whether or not something's fundamentally wrong in my current process, and if I tweak that, I can continue on and hopefully have some successes, meaning there's another opportunity for us to validate what we're doing, or this really is, in fact, a time for us to pivot, and if it is, where do we pivot to, and how do we pivot, and what does that mean to our business as a whole? Lack of sales skills, the ability to articulate and communicate to your customer, to your partners, to your prospective employees, this is a really critical factor. Again, this is going back to the whole suicide. If you can't communicate your way out of a paper bag, it gets very difficult to engage with people to get them excited about what you're doing. Inability to scale. My favorite story associated with this is 2 entrepreneurs I met in Mexico, and they had a technology that they sold to restaurants. And in the early days of the company, they were going to each set of restaurant managers, talking to them, engaging them, signing them as a client. And then they go to the next restaurant, and they do that, and they go to the next restaurant and do that. And I asked them, okay, so you've signed 50 restaurants. How many sales calls did that take? And what are you going to do to get 200 restaurants, 2,000 restaurants? And their ability to think about how do we go out to the market and engage with thousands and thousands of restaurants, they didn't have a plan together for that. So when you look at your business, you're building a global business, obviously, but you've got to be looking at scale. There's no straight lines to success. I had a great pair of Danish entrepreneurs that came to Silicon Valley, and they had great success. They sold their business after many, many years, and then they went back to Denmark. And what I found out, the story that they tell in Copenhagen was, we sat down at our kitchen table, we built this business over the kitchen table, and then we moved to Silicon Valley, and then we built the business, we hired a bunch of people, and about 6 years later, we sold the company for $250 million. And then they went back to Denmark, and they told this very succinct, beautiful story, and everybody thought, wow, it's really easy to go to Silicon Valley and be successful. It's not, okay? What they did was what I call selective omission. So they deleted all the details associated with the fact that they didn't get the contract, that had to mortgage their house, they paid the bills with credit cards, everybody worked for 3 months without salary, et cetera, et cetera. Meaning, my point here is that if it sounds too easy, it really is too easy. So in conclusion, I think that you can find your way. There are definitely a lot of strategies and tactics that can use. But the single one piece of advice I'll give you is find good mentors and advisors to help you. Make sure that that's part of the culture here, because that's one of the ways that you're going to be most successful in growing your business and sort of minimize the possibility of suicide. Thank you. Oh, and by the way, my book is available on Amazon. That's my sales pitch.
Any questions from the audience? Raise your hand if you have a question. Oh, there's one here. Please wait for the catch box.
Does it work? Does it work now?
It works.
Hi, Michelle. Thanks for the fabulous presentation.
Thanks.
Since you've been to so many countries, any patterns of failure that are specific to certain parts of the world? Do things go wrong in Brazil mostly in one way and in China in any other specific way?
Do things go wrong in one region versus another region? In my experience, no. The reasons for failure are kind of all in the same general categories. And it really boils down to understanding your market and then building something that your market's going to buy and pay for today. So I wouldn't say there's any geographic differences. More questions?
Please wait for the catch box here.
It's not. Yeah?
Yeah, I hear you.
You had one slide about timing.
Yeah.
So what are the indications that your timing is right? So how do I know as a startup that my timing is okay?
Right. So the question is, how do I know whether or not the timing is right for my startup? And I think that you've really got to sort of pre-identify some profiles of customers that you think are going to want to buy the product or the service, and figure out from them how severe the pain point is and whether or not they really are going to pay for it, et cetera. And then trying to understand sort of the longer trajectory of 1 year, 2 year, 3 years to figure out if there's a continuing opportunity there. So it mainly boils down to profiling your customer, understanding enough about them and their behavior and their business, their preferences, attitudes, et cetera, and then figuring out if there's different profiles of customers that are going to adopt sooner or later, so that you can understand how long the market tail is there. So it's research. Yeah. Any more questions? Okay.
I have one.
Yes, sir.
So you've seen startups over several years, several decades. And then we have now supposedly easier tools to talk to customers, easier tools to understand the market. Do you see the same mistakes, or are there some mistakes kind of on the rise, or some mistakes kind of getting lesser?
Yeah, so I've been working with startups for about 15 years all over the world, and I do see some of the same repeated mistakes, regardless of the fact that information is so readily available, that disciplines like Lean Startup, MVP, Business Model Canvas, all those things are readily available. I still do see the same repeating mistakes, regardless of the geography.
So this presentation is evergreen?
I would say so. Some of this stuff, I went back to some presentations I made 4 or 5 years ago, and there was about half a dozen of these things that were still systemic or endemic problems then.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One last question. Here.
Thank you for the talk. Do you think that if you get all these things right, so you study all the mistakes, you counteract against them, is that enough to build a successful company? Or do you think being an entrepreneur requires like that magic spark too?
I think there's a certain amount of magic, luck, and timing that goes into it. Most of the interviews that we did for the book, about two dozen interviews, I heard luck as one of the factors, meaning I was in the right place at the right time, I met the right guy, I missed my bus or my plane, or I had stories, all kinds of stories like that. But I think that there's certain sort of built-in disciplines that you can do, yet there's that je ne sais quoi that's really kind of over and above. And a lot of times that's just sort of the internal burning fire. But I think there's a little bit of something different in there too, in addition to just basic best practices.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right, you guys, thank you so much.
Thank you, Michelle. Give a little souvenir from the conference.
Thank you, Andrus.
All right. And the final talk of this morning is, so we looked at what we as startups can do, and we looked at what can go wrong. But it's not really about us. Like there's more to just doing the right things and not doing the wrong things. We sometimes forget that the world out there doesn't live in this AR, VR, social tech connected world, but there's a lot of kind of laggards, and there's a lot of old school thinking out there still. And I think the last talk of the morning will help to also think about that in a useful way. So I'd like to invite to the stage your last speaker of the morning. She's also a serial entrepreneur. She runs a web design agency, a digital marketing agency, and a social networking events series. Please put your hands together, and she's also an author. So please put your hands together for your final speaker of the morning, Saija Mahon.
So, good morning, everyone. I feel really old now because you mentioned old school, and it was like the last speaker is really old school. I need the clicker. There we are. So, this morning I wanted to talk to you more about digitalization at the core of change. It sounds really drastic for us old school people, but actually it sounds really exciting for you guys because you are the change makers. You are the disruptors. That's why we are here today in Latitude 59, learning from each other and discovering what new is up and coming. However, as an old school person, we need to remember the consumers, our customers, our clients at the other side who are going through a different kind of change. And we really need to get our educational and informational piece right so that our customers and clients will understand what we are trying to do with our products and services that obviously are being enabled by the digital age today. So, internet is not a new thing. I mean, my team calls me the digital dinosaur, hopefully not because of the way I look. But I've been in the digital industry for 15 years, and I've seen the huge change how the internet, and especially online marketing that I'm specialist in, has changed the way we interact with our consumers and other businesses as well. So about 15 years ago, it was all about pushing content out there, optimizing websites, and just pushing them in front of our potential clients. Few banners, ads as well. However, nowadays, because of the likes of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, social media, blogs, and forums, the internet has become interactive. There are conversations going on. We're doing our daily functions via using internet. Consumers are coming online. Businesses are coming online as well. And obviously, with that, there's a huge opportunity for us entrepreneurs, business owners, and startups. So really, digitalization is the key to transformation. And I've been doing this quite a long time, seen various clients and traditional businesses being transported into the digital age, and that's a huge change. It's still happening. The internet has become an indispensable aspect of any business model. I mean, you here today, you are creating businesses out of the digital age, digital products, digital services. However, we need to remember how to really bring those traditional industries into the digital age as well, because without those industries and potential clients and how our new products and services can make their lives easier, more effective, cost-effective, and without them understanding what we are trying to do, we have no businesses that will flourish for many years to come. Customer really is a key to our success. So can we survive without technology? We don't really want to survive without technology. We are here in a tech conference. Technology is coming out of our ears and mouths and everywhere. We love technology. So we need to change that conversation, because this is the question I hear many, many times from the older generation, for example. They are scared. Technology, they don't understand it, therefore it's intimidating. They won't buy into it. And these are our customers. We need to educate how technology can improve their businesses and everyday lives. Obviously, as entrepreneurs and business owners, the virtuality can really benefit us in terms of social learning. We're sharing information here today. However, hopefully we will continue the conversation outside of these walls via digital channels, blogs, forums, and so forth. So it's really important that we utilize these opportunities. So digitalization, obviously, it doesn't only affect startups. Most of us are here startups, or you guys. It affects scaling up and global expansion as well. So it's really important to realize how can we enter the market, how we can scale up effectively by using internet, digital channels, digital marketing, and how we can scale up effectively. So there's lots of new exciting things. This was mentioned earlier by the first speaker, I believe. There's Internet of Things, IoT. There's more connected devices, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, AI, VR, IoT. These are all terms that we know, isn't it? We're very familiar, very excited about them. But for example, my mom, when I try to explain to her about AI, she's like, oh, that's the noise that you do when you step on a Lego. Ay, 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 ay. Oh, yeah. So we need education. We need to educate the older generations amongst, of course, with some millennials as well, which I belong to. I mean, the truth is that reality and human mind will be digitalized, and we need to educate our consumer base. So, in terms of generations and understanding, and this is something I come across every day, there's few different categories. There's the older generation, like my mom, but they can still be your clients and consumers, I'm sure, for some of your startups and apps and things. Then there's the millennials, like myself. So I've seen the time before internet and during the internet and how things have really changed. And then we have digital natives. So obviously young, cool hipsters, hackers and hustlers who are used to dealing with their everyday life via digitalization and digital channels. So it's not really all about technology and software and hardware. It's also about wetware, which is an interesting term that I learned, as human beings. So we need to make sure that in order for us, obviously, to flourish as businesses, we need to educate the consumer base, but also in order to really effectively grow and make sure we have that solid foundation to grow, because nowadays you've seen huge, rapid growth on the latest technology firms, which I actually have an example later on. But it's important that we have a foundation there, skill set, talent, people, teams. There's new roles popping up all the time. The educational system is really lacking behind sometimes. As a business owner, I come across this all the time. I have a challenge right now. I can't find people, talented enough people. Maybe some of you guys can talk to me later if you are looking for a job. Because these roles are new. So we need to make sure our resources are there, our training programs are in place in order to accommodate growth and in order to service our customers and clients in the way they need to be serviced. Otherwise, we don't have a solid foundation to grow from. But then obviously, digitalization will bring us benefits. As soon as you enter online, everything is measurable. You leave a digital footprint. There's efficiencies to be made, cost efficiencies. We can automate a lot of stuff. But don't worry, we need humans still. So lots of benefits, but lots of challenges as well. I'm in the search engine optimization arena, and I've been doing it for 15 years, and still some of my clients or our prospects think it's black magic. So very, very important when we scale up, when we start, when we look for the great idea and bring out our ideas, our startups, our new technologies, and so forth, really important to think about who is your customer and how can we engage with them, talking to them in their language, and how can they understand what we are trying to do. And also, it's very important to have your talent pool in place that you can dip into. So a few examples, which you probably know. Uber. These are companies that have not been around for so long, and they have really severely, but in a good way, disrupted industries. Uber, I took an Uber here this morning. Don't know if Uber is not in Scandinavia, in Finland, where I'm from. Airbnb, I'm staying in Airbnb. Airbnb doesn't own any properties. Uber doesn't own any vehicles. And Netflix completely disrupted the TV industry and brought out the binge-watching culture for us. So something to think about. And the key takeaways from this session really is when you develop your idea, when you bring it to life, when you do your research and development, think about your customer. Think about who will benefit of your product or your service and why. And get your educational and informational piece right. Because there might not be, the understanding We are talking in a very technical language, so we need to translate that into something understandable and approachable in order to flourish for many, many years to come. So thank you very much. Don't get left behind in the digital economy. And let me know if you have any questions.
Any questions from the audience? I'll ask the first one then. So,
No.
so digitalization, like it's probably well understood for this audience here. Do you see, but like in the bigger kind of world outside the startup bubble, it's still a new thing. So do you know of any startups, any tech companies that are doing it well, that are kind of catering their offering well for this world which is not yet fully digitalized and which is still moving into the age of digitalization? Who do the thing you talked about well in the startup world?
Yeah, there's a range. Some startup obviously does it well and they have their messaging right. But obviously, as a digital agency, we deal with a lot of startups and we help startups to get their messaging right as well if it's not yet there. We often get blinded by our businesses and products and services and apps and what have you. I certainly do. I talk about SEO and PPC, and then our clients are like, I need CPR, for goodness sakes. So we need to really understand how our consumers can really engage with us when speaking in their language, not in ours. So there's a range. Some do get it and some don't. It is normal because we get blinded. We get blinded by our businesses. We're so excited that we forget that, oh, actually, not everybody will understand this.
So is the takeaway that just do kind of more research and segmentation, or is there more to it?
Yeah, I think it's important to know buyer personas. So who are you trying to sell? How do they look like? What do they like? Where do they hang out? What are their buying habits? What are they doing now that you can perhaps improve with your technology or your offering service, whatever it might be? So yes, definitely important to do some buyer persona research, market research especially.
Okay.
And go-to market research. There's still different cultures. You can't just put your product out there and think it will sell globally. There's still cultural differences, and different messaging will work in different cultures and languages as well.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions in the audience? Raise your hand if you want to ask a question. Or if you'd like to just touch the talk box. All right, then thank you, Saija.
Thank you.
Thank you for the...
That's probably.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you. And you can follow Saija on Twitter. You can check out her newsletter in saijamahon.co.uk. So thank you. You've been a wonderful audience. You've been the best audience in this room so far.
See, the audience gets little. And we also would like to give a little thank you to Andrus, to you as well.
Oh,
thank you for moderating these talks. And actually, we had a little question to you as well. So you're the guy to blame for Pipedrive marketing. So what would you say would be like your top kind of, the top thing that has pushed Pipedrive to this place where it is right now?
I have 3 theses in life, like in my work life. One is always market a product which doesn't need marketing. Second, as an angel investor, always invest in companies that don't need my money. And thirdly, as a manager, always hire people who don't need management. So I think doing these 3 things well, from my perspective, has worked really well so far.
Great. Well, thank you very much for you as well.
Thank you.
Woo! Thanks.